if you're a salespeople person or a small business person, you should be looking at this from all angles and really understanding why you're doing something the way you're doing that and constantly evolving that too, because that's going to change. It's just like being a human being. I'm not who I was a year ago. I'm not who I was 5 years ago. I'm trying to make active adjustments to fit, what is going to be good for me right now.
What's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Close More podcast. My name is Roger, and with me, I have the founder of Rose Dagger LLC, Glen. Glen, I would love for you to take the chance to introduce yourself, please.
I am Glen Ladd with Rose Dagger LLC. I think you did a great job. Based out of Austin, Texas. I am a leader in tech sales and services and have built out multiple different sales teams, processes, strategies for go-to-market. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today. And before I started, I want to say this on the podcast too. Roger is doing everything to put himself forward and really putting his company in a good position by being innovative and going through different avenues. So I'm just happy to be here and taking notes from you and the iSales team as well.
Thank you so much for that, Glen. That really means a lot. I would love to hear more about your GTM strategy. What would you say is the philosophy behind that?
Man, it's everyone is different. Go to market is usually I don't come up with the idea. I have done that before. In fact, I'm actually about to launch a product with one of my mentors, Scott Leese. I'm going to keep that a little bit close to vest, but that was my first time that we've taken an idea all the way through. But generally what happens is that somebody comes to me with a product and we take a look at the product and the idea behind it is not always the value statements that are going to resonate with the people that you're talking to. So it's first things first, it's about generally narrowing down that market, coming up with some customer profiles, and then talking to those customer profiles to see where they find value, where they don't find value, and kind of hashing it down this road so that, 85% of the customers that you talk to are going to be walked down a path where you're kind of helping them connect the dots of where this is going to actually benefit their business. So I'm a big proponent of having a strong discovery up front. And a strong discovery doesn't just mean asking questions to understand the customer. A lot of the questions that I ask, I generally know the answer to, but I want them to say it out loud and also course correct me on their understanding of where they are. So it's an education process. The sales is, I think, a huge education process. And if you can educate people and help them connect the dots along the way of how this could actually benefit their business coming from a tech, a services side, that's where you start. You talk to prospects, see what they love, see what they hate, and kind of talk to them and brainstorm ideas that they could actually use the products that they find beneficial. And so that's where you start.
Got it. That's awesome. And thank you so much for that. It's really insightful, especially coming from somebody that's a founder like yourself. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find real value in this.
Thanks. Yeah, I certainly hope so. And yeah, I've done it a few different times. And to be honest with you guys, I've made more mistakes than I've made successes, but you learn from those mistakes. And so it's about embracing that. I was actually talking to a former colleague of mine yesterday about imposter syndrome, and people post about this all the time. And I think, and rightfully so, everybody deals with it.
I've seen Richard Harris post about it a lot.
Richard Harris posts about it a ton. Yeah, he does. And I think it's good coming from a sales leader like Richard But I think that people are a little bit off the mark and making it about themselves. But in reality, what I think it is, it's how they relate to people like Richard. It's Richard or Scott Leese or, any other of these sales leaders out there, they're not perfect and they didn't do it perfect the first time. But what they do that makes them good at what they do is that they factor in contingencies. Okay, we're going to try this. If this doesn't work, what are our back doors here? So that we can still make this work without this just being a hard stop. So yeah, I think that imposter syndrome is something that everybody deals with, but it's more about how they're relating to kind of the social media world that we live in. It's kind of seeing the perfect pictures of like your ex-girlfriend, when in reality it's like things aren't probably going totally perfect, you know? So yeah, it's just about how you relate to other people and like how you kind of create the narrative in your own mind of what they're doing. But in reality, everybody's human, man, and you're human. So as you're going through this journey, like have some empathy for yourself in making mistakes, because you're going to make them. If you don't make them, then you're probably not taking enough risks.
Absolutely. And it's all about that course correction and really analyzing what you're doing and how you can really optimize it or make it better. I love that.
Exactly.
Awesome. Awesome. In terms of leadership, how does somebody separate themselves from being just a sales rep into becoming a leader?
So yeah, I think that this kind of goes back to my sales philosophy too, and I think that it just comes down with being like. So let me separate a couple of things out.
Yeah.
So I think that like I hear a lot of people talk about sales being about relationships. I think that it is about one major component of a relationship, and none of the rest, which is trust. You've got to build trust, and I think that the same thing goes with your people. And the way that you build trust with people, in my mind, just to make it really simple, I actually posted about this yesterday. You do what you say you're going to do, you show up on time, and you're prepared. Like, just keep it super, super simple. That is a great way to build trust with people. And it's the same thing. Like, I don't try to oversell people. In fact, I don't like selling people that I don't feel like are a good fit. I'd rather walk away and say no to a customer who's like ready to buy that's not a good fit than I would like try to push somebody who is a really good fit and just needs that education, that trust, and things like that. So as far as leadership goes, first of all, starting out on the hiring front, it's just like finding the right customers. You've got to find the right fit to build your culture. And then that relationship starts right there. I think a lot of people or a lot of companies do the best to hide their comp and things like that, which I get. Like, you can scare people away if you've got a 30K base, but, a huge OTE without talking to them about the opportunity. But ultimately, you need to bring people in, make them feel comfortable. I think you feel comfortable by being straightforward with them. And that also means like if they're a good fit or if they're not a good fit, and then also giving people feedback, because on the back end of that, like those people might be a perfect fit for something that you have down the road. And so like creating that relationship built on trust is important. But as you go through, it's about setting right expectations with your people, making sure that they understand what they should expect, what their expectations are for their role, and also why. Like, it is really important to tell people why you are telling them to do things. And as a leader, if you're getting pushback on the why and you can't speak to that, well, then it's time for you to take a step back and be like, that's a really good point. I haven't thought about that. Thank you for bringing that up, and let's explore that and see if there's some validity there. So I think that it's just about building a relationship that's based around trust and respect, and putting people in a position where they can be successful through, good recruiting.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for that, Glenn. It's funny that you mentioned Scott Leese, though. I'm actually going to interview him here in a little bit. I think today, actually.
Oh, nice. Tell him I said, what up?
Will do. Will do.
Yeah, Scott and I have an interesting relationship. So when I first got into sales, I went and interviewed at Outbound Engine and interviewed with him one-on-one, which is incredible because at the time, I think Outbound had like something like 100 salespeople. They were dogging on me because I wore a tie. Of course, I'm like trying to get a job. So
good job interview.
But I interviewed with Scott, and we were like completely on the same page, same level. I was really impressed by him. And then he gave me a job offer, and I didn't take it. I went in another direction. But down the road, I mean, we stayed in touch. And then I ended up, obviously, like I ended up at Main Street Hub, which he was the original VP of sales for. So I kind of learned a lot about his process without him actually being there. And then moved to Qualio with him, and that's where we became buddies, and like actually like got to work with one another and good colleagues. So yeah, I'm excited to get to work with him again.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your idea, or is that all private information?
Man, it's coming out soon. I don't want to spill the beans too early. You can ask him if he's going to say something. If he says something, then we're going to have a private conversation. No, I'm just kidding. No, it should be coming out pretty soon. It's kind of what we're talking about right now, which is just like helping salespeople to become, the best that they can be, especially in the circumstances that we live in right now. There's not the environment of coming into the office for most salespeople. And, we came from the world of inside sales. I personally believe that's the most difficult sales environment that there is, because there's the level of separation. Like, the only thing that would be harder would be selling people through like an internet forum like Twitter or Facebook. But calling people on the phone is like intrusive. And then you don't get to like put a face or like much humanity behind it. You've got to just focus on just like raw sales skill and talent to get people interested in the first place, and then to finally close them. So yeah, I think that it's a really difficult thing. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but by removing people from that sales floor, you're also removing that vibe and the excitement, and also the person next to you who's like overheard a call and was like, "Hey, I heard you saying this. Like, why'd you say that? Like, maybe you should try," getting that like active feedback. Obviously, we're adjusting to that, and sales managers are doing, I think, a phenomenal job making these adjustments, but you can't monitor the floor like you used to, which is a challenge for people who are developing. And so we're trying to fill those gaps.
Got it. I love that. And it's all about building that camaraderie with your fellow salespeople. It's funny that you bring that up, because here at iSales, they're actually moving me out to Florida to go be with the rest of with our sales director and our new sales guy as well. So nice. We're all trying to be together and kind of have that bullpen mentality.
Dude, I love that. Yeah, Florida's firing from the hip right now. They'll let you do a lot of different things. So, dude, enjoy it. Wear a mask. Be safe.
I definitely will. I'm excited for the opportunity, but I love that working together as a team. It's something you don't see a lot anymore, and especially with COVID-19 and everything that's happened over the past year, it's been really hard to kind of build that camaraderie. Do you think that there's a good way to kind of build those relationships if people are still in a virtual workplace?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a challenge. I think that if you could figure that out, you'd make a lot of money. The camaraderie thing, and I completely agree with, I think that the sales world has changed so much on that front from, I've heard stories. I mean, I guess I've encountered it a little bit, but not at scale and kind of under the circumstances that I've heard about. But it used to be really cutthroat, people like snaking deals from each other. That stuff does still happen. But I think that like people are wise to that now, and it's more about creating like a team competitiveness, that it's like, I watched this show called Playbook on Netflix the other day, and Doc Rivers, the first episode, I thought was the best episode. He talked about like galvanizing the Celtics when they first got Paul Pierce and Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett, yeah. And like how they were all leaders, and so it made it really difficult to like all of them wanted to lead the way. And so I'm gonna forget the name of this, but it's like he learned about this African word called Ubuntu, I think is what it is. I might be saying this wrong. Don't hold me to that. But essentially the idea behind it is like your humanity is only associated with how other humans view you. And so by like creating this unit together and the humanity behind it, that's how we're going to create this team, is that we're all in this together. And like what I do is going to affect you and your humanity, and what you do is going to affect me. But ultimately, if we're all moving in the direction to becoming better, then that is what's going to help us win this championship. And ultimately, that's what happened, is that this idea behind like, I'm competing with you for my own sake. And if you're not competing back, then you're not good for my life. Like, you're not good for my humanity. So I think that you just have to like kind of create things that you can galvanize people behind. and then encourage that interaction. I don't think you should force it. I don't think that you should force like, Zoom happy hours and things like that. But you have to create the environment to have these interactions that actually align with members of the team so that it happens a little bit more organically. But that's up to your leadership to be able to do that and figure out what those ways are.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Glenn.
Sure. I need to look up that word to make sure. I'm pretty sure it's Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. I haven't watched it, but I'm definitely going to have to check it out here, probably after the podcast.
I said it right. Ubuntu. Yeah.
There we go.
Nailed it.
What do you think is the biggest opportunity in the sales world over the next 5 years? People just have different ideas. They envision the way the sales world is going to look in a couple of years. I just wanted to see if you had any of your own thoughts on.
Yeah. So let me bucket that into two different things. So the first thing I would say, as far as like the actual execution of sales, obviously it's going to be remote. And like I said, we're still figuring that out right now. I think that there has been a lot that's been done, and that it's kind of, from a cultural perspective in sales, I feel like everybody's kind of like business as usual. This is just how it goes. But I don't think we've mastered it yet. I'm sure that probably everybody listening to this, if you're in, working from home right now, making dials, you've had problems with phone connectivity, and like calls dropping and things like that. And so like, that was one thing I experienced with my first, like when I moved a team from an inside sales team to a remote team, is that our dialer was not set up so that the modems that my team had at their houses, specifically like a few of the members had at their houses, it like the VoIP system wasn't set up like that. So there was like a 1.5-second delay, which is a huge challenge. So I think that the more that we can like close the gap from technology to like kind of humanize a little bit more would be good. But I don't really know that it's necessary. Like phone sales is been around for a long time. If you're good at it and good at executing it, then I don't think that a whole lot needs to change. But I think that there could be some tweaks made that make it, a little bit more effective for people who are entering into it. I think that you asked a good question earlier too, which was about like galvanizing the team, because I think that that is going to be like a big gap, especially for people who are looking to enter into sales, because they don't have that camaraderie. And, working from home is a different beast. Like, again, like I was talking to a friend the other day about like, if I'm holding myself accountable to my team or holding myself accountable to like somebody in my family or a friend or something like that, that shit's going to get done, But if it's just me, sometimes it's hard for me to hold myself accountable to myself, which is something that I'm actually working on. And I think when you're at home and working from home, it just becomes a little bit easier to get distracted and lose that sight of like, hey, I'm doing this for me, and like, I'm doing it for them, but I'm doing it for me too. And so, exactly, make a living and to like learn. I think that that's a big thing that people want too, is to like learn and get experience in how to do something as well. And but so I think that there's some opportunities there from the technology front to like shore up some technical difficulties, and then also I think that there's some opportunity for some ways to enhance leadership and mentorship for people who don't have that sales floor, to kind of like coach them on like the mindset and the accountability that's going to make them successful. On the other end of the spectrum too, about like what I think is going to be like the biggest sales play, I think it's education. Education is everything to me. And I think that we're going to start seeing a disruption in the turning of the guard with things like universities. The university model, I think, is a little bit stale. I think that the technology has come far enough. Like, I'm not saying it's going to go away, but it's definitely going to change quite a bit. Like, I think that people don't want to spend $80,000 on tuition at an in-state school and spend 4 years putting all of their time into that when they could be like learning, not having to go into a classroom and getting this information from people who are like top in their field, you know? That's why we're seeing things like Masterclass coming up, Duolingo, which is like $1 billion company now. I think we're just kind of scratching the surface on that. And I think that it's so needed. Like, I think that, you know, there's a lot of desperation in society right now who just like don't know how to make it happen for themselves. And I was listening to a stand-up comedian the other day, Jim Jeffries, talking to Bill Burr, and he was talking about the American dream, and he was goofing around because he was like, the American dream is great because it's like whatever you work towards, if you work hard enough, you can do it. And then he's like, but that's not just an American thing. You know that, right? Like that works anywhere in the world. If you work hard enough, you can do it. The difference in America, though, is that if you don't do that, you're screwed. And Bill Burr was kind of like, yeah, you kind of got us there. We don't really have much of a safety net. And I think that there could be, like, we could fill these skill gaps to make people more successful at something, make it more accessible to people, so that we have a better society and people who are better at figuring out how to make money and provide for themselves and like close that wage gap that increases their quality of life. And I think that if we do that as a society, we're all going to be in a much better spot. And so I think that we have the tools to make education literally change the world in a positive way.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's all about that self-education. I read a quote one time that said, a formal education will make you a living and a self-education will make you a fortune. And I think that's a very true statement.
Absolutely. Well, and it's also just about learning how to learn too. You know, it's not just about taking notes and applying it. It's about understanding like, okay, well, why are we doing it this way? Like, what's the deeper understanding of it? Because if you can start to do that, that's how these companies figure out how to like disrupt markets. It's like, well, you know, to give you an example, I worked for a company a while back that literally we had an objection for them that it was like, we don't have Bluetooth functionality, but it didn't make any sense because with the software that we were using, they didn't need to use printers. So like, that's what they wanted Bluetooth for, is they wanted the Bluetooth to be able to connect to their computers so that then they could like print this stuff out. But then when we figured that, like I found that out, it was just like, well, okay, so there's an education process that needs to happen here. What if I told you you didn't need a printer anymore? They were like, oh my God. So understanding like why people need things. And I think that that's something that good salespeople do really well, which is just like understanding their needs from a level that it's like, this should be a win-win for everybody. And also like, that's going to help you to find the right job for you, find something you're passionate about, find something that you can speak about. And if you can find something that you're passionate about early on, or at least like manufacture some passion for it, for what it can do for the people that you're working for, that's going to make you successful and like give you the foundation to be able to learn, so that you can like, once you scale up, then you can start to pick things that are going to be better for you personally.
Absolutely. And would you say that in terms of like the growth and things like that, is that only for salespeople, or could that be, I guess, the same philosophy could be applied to small businesses trying to grow as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, essentially what ends up happening, like if you're a business owner, you've got to be a generalist. I would say like if you're a salesperson who's looking into like going into management, going into executive level leadership, going into consulting, you can't just have one dimension. It's kind of like a fighter coming in with just throwing a straight right. That's all they do, is throw a straight right and move forward. Like you're not going to have a good time in there. And so learning like how things work around you and the entropy that it all causes, right? Like, so if my marketing leads just crap out, then like and you're working in like a direct to consumer type of sale, like you're in really bad shape. So how do you create contingencies for that? Or how do you ensure that those leads continue to flow? Or like if your operations go down and I know one of the questions you ask people is like, what's something you can't live without? I just say the internet, because every single technology I've ever used has broken at some point, and it's an isolated COVID that's happening, which is just like, well, this doesn't work, so we just got to wait for it to finish. It's like, no, you can still pick up the phone, you can still jot this stuff down, you can use other things, but if your operations go down, you need to have contingencies for that. And it's like, this is the best way of doing things, but it's still doable. And then like, what are we tracking? Why are we tracking it? Why is it important? Why is it important to me? Why is it important to upper leadership? How are they using this to like actually move the ball forward in terms of our process? So yeah, I think that to kind of answer your question, if you're a salespeople person or a small business person, you should be looking at this from all angles and really understanding why you're doing something the way you're doing that, and constantly evolving that too, because that's going to change. It's just like being a human being. I'm not who I was a year ago. I'm not who I was 5 years ago. I'm trying to make active adjustments to fit, what is going to be good for me right now. And like a year ago, I wasn't waking up at 5 a.m, but I've learned that like if I get up early, that's when I'm the sharpest. So, I get up, have coffee, I get some time aside. But, when I was in college, that would not have worked for me. So, yeah, it's understanding why you're doing something and why it's important to keep things simple is important for anybody, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Glenn. And I guess my last question, it's the name of the show. How can reps close more deals? And maybe we'll touch on some things we already talked about, but what are some tips you want to give all salespeople out there?
Yeah, so let me give you a tip that I find that a lot of reps do, including myself a lot of times. If you want to close more deals, do not assume that the customer understands your product like you understand your product. Like, you have to understand the proficiency of the person that you are talking to make sure that you are helping connect the dots on how it's actually going to benefit them and what the value is. So like if you're talking to somebody about a CRM, if you're talking to a CEO about that, he might not spend any time in the CRM. And so, I see salespeople who are selling something who get so frustrated that they're like, why don't they see this? That's what your job is to understand the level of proficiency of each person that you're talking with along the streams and relate that product with how it's important to them. So the person who's actually using the product, they're going to see a different value than the person who is not like buying the product, like the CEO. For the CEO, you're talking about increasing efficiency, increasing effectiveness. What does that mean for your bottom line? How do we actually do that? Well, compare that to the current process that they have, right? Rather than just taking them right into the software and showing it to them, you have to stop and get on, like, level set those things to make sure that they understand. And even if it's the comprehension just isn't there, you need to be able to figure out how to explain your pitch so that it connects with them and resonates with them on a value level. So don't assume that the person that you're like, we do this every day. You know what I mean? Like every day we're on the phone talking about whatever product we're selling. And it's easy to think that like, man, I don't understand how these people don't get this, because we're experts on it. Like probably not to the level we're going to be able to build it or anything, but we understand what it does. I think that there is a gap that a lot of salespeople have right now, that it's like they're trying to just skip the step and assume that the person they're talking to is on the same level, where that is a huge part of the process. And if they can't get on the same level and they don't see value in it before you actually show the product, then you're saving yourself some time, because they're never going to see value in it. So yeah, I think that it's not like, do not assume that they know nothing, and also just kind of beat yourself up a little bit. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to kind of ask you some questions to make sure that we're on the same page here. So like, what's been your experience doing that? Like what, like, and just dig into asking them questions to relate it back to value.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Glen. Glen Ladd, the founder of Rose Dagger LLC. This podcast was sponsored by iSales CRM. And thank you guys so much. And I'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks.
Thank you. Gang, gang.